The rain hammered down like grapeshot on the Union encampment, turning the Pennsylvania soil into a sucking mire that clung to boots and bayonets alike. Private Elias Thorne, his woolen sack coat sodden and heavy, hunched over a meager fire that sputtered defiantly against the deluge. Around him, the remnants of Company K from the 20th Maine Infantry scraped at the bottoms of their haversacks, fingers trembling from cold and the gnawing ache of empty bellies. It was July 4th, 1863, the day after the thunderous clash at Gettysburg had ebbed. But victory's echo felt hollow here on the fringes of the battlefield. Supplies had been cut off by rebel skirmishers still lurking in the woods, and starvation's grip tightened with every passing hour. Elias's messmate, Corporal Jedediah Hale, muttered a curse as he bit into a cracker so hard it might as well have been stone, his eyes darting to the shadowed tree line, where the forest whispered secrets in the wind. The air reeked of wet earth, gunpowder residue, and the faint metallic tang of blood from the wounded who lay groaning in makeshift tents nearby. Elias shifted his Enfield rifle across his lap, its barrel slick with rain, and scanned the perimeter. Sentries paced unevenly, their forms blurred by the downpour, lanterns swinging like pendulums in the gloom. No one spoke of the rumors that had slithered through the ranks like smoke. Tales of the hungry ghosts that haunted these fields, spirits born from the famine of past battles, luring the starving with illusions of feasts only to drag them into eternal want. Elias dismissed it as campfire folly, the kind soldiers spun to ward off the real horrors of war. But as night deepened, the rain's rhythm seemed to carry a low, rhythmic hum, like distant artillery or something older, hungrier. Jedediah leaned closer to the fire, his bearded face gaunt under the flickering light, shadows carving deep lines into his cheeks. He tore a strip of hardtack and offered half to Elias, who shook his head. "Save it," Elias whispered, his voice barely cutting through the patter. Their rations had dwindled to nothing but crumbs and promises from the quartermaster, who swore wagons were en route but hadn't been seen since the rebels' charge on Cemetery Hill. The encampment sprawled across a low rise, ringed by felled trees as hasty barricades, but the forest beyond pressed in like an enemy flank. Strange calls echoed from the depths, not the whip poor Will's soldiers knew, but elongated wails that twisted into pleas for bread, for water, for mercy. As the fire dimmed, Elias felt a prickle along his spine, the kind that came before a volley. He rose, slinging his rifle, and trudged toward the edge of camp where Private Amos Reed stood sentry, his kepi hat tilted against the rain. Amos was young, barely 18, with eyes wide as saucers in the lantern's glow. "You hear that?" Amos hissed, pointing into the murk. Elias strained, and there it was, a soft rustle, like footsteps in leaves, followed by the unmistakable scent of roasting meat wafting on the breeze. His stomach clenched, a traitor to his resolve. "Rebels cooking supper," Elias muttered, but doubt gnawed at him. The enemy lines were miles off, and no firelight pierced the trees. They waited, breaths held, as the aroma grew stronger, laced with hints of cornbread and stew, foods they hadn't tasted since before the march from Taneytown. Amos licked his lips, his rifle dipping. Maybe deserters, or foragers left behind. But Elias gripped his arm, pulling him back. The legends whispered in his mind now, ghosts of the starved, remnants from the Revolution or earlier Indian wars, forever bound to these cursed grounds where blood had soaked the earth for generations. Survivors spoke of them in hushed tones around hospital cots, apparitions that mimicked the living, offering sustenance that turned to ash in the mouth, leading men to wander into the wilderness, never to return. The first turning point came without warning. From the tree line emerged a figure, cloaked in shadow, moving with a limp that echoed the wounded's shuffle. It carried a sack, bulging as if with provisions, and raised a hand in what might have been a salute or a beckon. Amos stepped forward, drawn like a moth to flame, his boots squelching in the mud. "Halt! Who goes there?" he called, but his voice cracked with hope more than authority. The figure paused, and in the lantern's feeble beam, Elias glimpsed a face, pale, emaciated, eyes sunken like those of the dead they'd buried that morning. It whispered something, words lost in the rain, but the scent intensified, pulling at their guts. Amos advanced, rifle lowered, and Elias followed reluctantly, heart pounding. The figure dropped the sack at the forest's edge, spilling what looked like apples, cheese, and loaves, mirages of plenty in their famine. Amos knelt, reaching out, but as his fingers brushed the bounty, a chill wind surged, extinguishing lanterns across the camp. Darkness swallowed them, and the figure vanished into mist. Amos cried out, a sharp yelp of pain, and when Elias fumbled for his matchsafe to relight the lantern, he found Amos clutching his hand, fingers blistered as if scorched. The sack was gone, replaced by a pile of withered leaves and bones. Animal or otherwise, Elias couldn't tell. It burned me, Amos gasped, eyes wild. Like fire, but cold. Panic rippled through the encampment as sentries converged, their faces etched with the same hollow fear. Jedediah arrived, musket in hand, barking orders to form a perimeter. But the damage was done. Whispers spread like wildfire, men clutching their empty stomachs, eyes darting to the woods. Elias helped Amos back to the fire, wrapping his hand in a rag torn from his own shirt. The boy's skin peeled away in layers, revealing raw flesh that wept clear fluid. It promised food, Amos murmured, rocking slightly. I heard it in my head, eat and the hunger ends. Elias said nothing, but the unease settled in his bones like the damp. The real war pressed on. Distant cannonades rumbled like thunder, but now an unseen foe stalked them, born of the starvation that had claimed so many in the winter camps before. As the night wore on, the rain eased to a drizzle, granting a false reprieve. Tension released momentarily. Men shared what scraps remained, swapping stories of home to drown the dread. Elias thought of his farm in Bangor, the harvest he'd miss, a letter from his wife tucked in his breast pocket, ink smudged by sweat and rain. Jedediah hummed a tune, the battle cry of freedom, his voice low and steady, anchoring the group. But the release was fleeting. The hum from the forest returned, louder, morphing into voices, names called out, pleas from fallen comrades. Elias, help me, one whispered, sounding like his brother, lost at Fredericksburg. The second eerie turning point unfolded under the cover of renewed darkness. Sergeant Harlan Crow, a grizzled veteran with a scar from Antietam bisecting his brow, gathered a small patrol, Elias, Jedediah, Amos, and 2 others, to scout the tree line. Can't let phantoms rule us, Harlan growled, his Springfield rifle gleaming. They moved out, boots silent in the mud, the air thick with the rot of unburied dead from the battle's fringes. Lanterns hooded to slits cast elongated shadows that danced like specters. As they penetrated the woods, the path narrowed, branches clawing at their uniforms, blue wool frayed at cuffs, brass buttons dulled by grime. Deeper in, the voices grew distinct, overlapping in a cacophony of despair. Bread, water, join us. The patrol halted at a clearing, where moonlight pierced the canopy like bayonet thrusts. There, amid twisted oaks, stood a spectral banquet. Tables laden with phantom feasts, flickering in and out of sight. Figures hovered around it. Translucent soldiers in tattered gray and blue, faces contorted in eternal hunger. One turned, its eyes voids, and extended a hand to Amos, who staggered forward, mesmerized. It's real this time, he breathed, but Elias yanked him back as the air turned frigid, frost rhyming their beards despite the summer night. Harlan fired a shot into the apparition, the crack echoing like judgment, but the bullet passed through, splintering bark behind. The figures dissolved into wisps, but not before one latched onto Private Larkin, the youngest of them, pulling him into the underbrush with inhuman strength. Larkin's screams cut short, replaced by a gurgling silence. The patrol retreated in chaos, Jedediah dragging Amos, Elias covering their rear with wild shots into the dark. Branches whipped their faces, roots tripped their feet, and the forest seemed to shift, paths twisting like serpents. They burst back into camp, breathless, Larkin gone, swallowed by the hungry ghosts, or so the legend would later claim. Higher tension built as the encampment fortified against the unseen. Men barricaded with crates and logs, but starvation weakened them. Hands shook on triggers, visions blurred. Elias felt it too, the pull, a whisper in his ear promising relief if he only wandered out. Jedediah confessed over the dying fire. I saw my ma there, cooking stew, but her eyes empty. Amos, his hand festering, babbled of curses laid by the land itself, angered by the blood spilled at Gettysburg. Real elements intertwined, the crack of picket fire from rebel holdouts, the moan of wounded begging for morphine, the relentless gnaw of empty guts. But the folklore deepened. The ghosts weren't mere hallucinations. They were the starved souls of prior wars, awakened by the fresh famine, feeding on the living's despair. The climactic struggle erupted as midnight tolled in distant church bells, muffled by the woods. The forest came alive, shadows coalescing into forms that encircled the camp. Lanterns guttered out one by one, plunged into unnatural dark, lit only by sporadic lightning flashes that revealed gaunt faces pressing against the barricades. Harlan rallied the men. "Hold the line!" But paranoia fractured them. Soldiers turned on each other, accusing phantoms in their midst. Elias saw Jedediah's eyes glaze, as if possessed, reaching for a knife with intent to carve forbidden meat. Elias barricaded in a shallow trench, mud up to his knees, rifle aimed at the encroaching mist. The ghosts whispered temptations, visions of bountiful tables superimposed over the barren ground. Amos succumbed first, crawling toward the tree line on all fours, muttering prayers twisted into pleas for food. A spectral hand grasped him, pulling him into the void, his final scream a wail of betrayed hunger. Jedediah fought beside Elias, swinging his bayonet at apparitions that reformed like smoke, but one pierced his defenses, a chill grip around his throat, siphoning his warmth until he collapsed, lips blue, breath ragged. Alone now in the suffocating climax, Elias faced the peak of fear. The ghosts swarmed, their forms merging into a colossal entity of writhing limbs and hollow eyes, the embodiment of Starvation's grip. It loomed over the encampment, the air vibrating with the cries of the damned. Elias fired his last rounds, bullets vanishing into ether, then resorted to his knife, slashing at tendrils that wrapped his limbs. Paranoia clawed his mind. Was this real, or the delirium of famine? He tasted blood on his lips, his own or imagined, as the entity pressed closer, promising eternal satiety in exchange for his soul. Survival instinct surged. He clawed free, stumbling through the trench, the ground quaking as if artillery bombarded from beyond. Dawn broke like a fragile mercy, the ghosts retreating with the light, dissolving into morning mist. Elias emerged from the trench, the sole survivor amid the silent camp. Bodies lay twisted, Jedediah frozen in a rictus of hunger. Amos vanished. Harlan slumped against the log, eyes staring at nothing. The encampment was a graveyard of blue uniforms, haversacks empty, fires cold. Elias clutched the letter from home, its words unread in the chaos, ink now blurred by tears or rain. He staggered toward the main Union lines, the forest silent behind him, but the dread lingered, a whisper on the wind, promising return should starvation grip again. In the years that followed, survivors and villagers whispered the legend of Gettysburg's hungry ghosts, a wartime myth born from that forsaken encampment. It warned of the unseen horrors war birthed, where the enemy's bullet was merciful compared to the slow devourer of want. Elias lived, but changed, gaunt forever, eyes haunted, sharing the tale by flickering hearths to wide-eyed recruits. And on stormy nights in Pennsylvania woods, some say the calls still echo, luring the unwary with scents of phantom feasts, ensuring the grip never fully loosens.